Good evening. I'd like to call the November 28th, 2022 public hearing to order. And we'll do a roll call.
That'd be lovely.
Bill Sight,
Cynthia Valley,
Kristen Zumar,
Tamara Stoner.
and we also have Chris Rogers, our city planner, with us tonight, Jan Lasco, city attorney, Sean Tucker. I'm assuming you'll be representing the Lukens Drive project along
Yes.
with other team members from the project and members of the public. So thank you all for coming. This is a public hearing on ordinance 536. It's an ordinance to rezone portions of property located at 130 Lukens Drive and 150 Lukens Drive, Newcastle. Its tax parcels 2122-001 and 2122-002, totaling 168.76 acres. From IOP zoning classification, industrial office park, to R3 zoning classification, multifamily residential. And that's 149.08 acres, and to GC zoning classification, general commercial, for 13.96 acres. And further to amend the city 2020 comprehensive plan in a matter consistent therewith. As a note, the Planning Commission has spent several meetings reviewing information related to this rezoning and comprehensive plan land use amendment, including a review of state planning comments through the PLUS process, and a comprehensive plan amendment workshop in October. And all of our meetings have been open to the public. Notice of this public hearing was posted, and adjacent property owners were notified by mail. And the public hearing was publicized in both the Weekly, the Newcastle Weekly, and in the News Journal. I am inviting the applicant to make a brief presentation on the proposed comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning. Mr. Sean Tucker,
Thank
turn
you,
it
Chair.
over to you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members. Hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving. I went back and did a little math, and this will be our seventh week. We've been meeting for about a half a year. I hope we've not worn out our welcome. But we received, I think, a lot of good questions and good comments, both from all of you and your town planner. And I appreciate having the time to fully vet those and research those and respond to those, based on analysis by our consultants, and just based on public records and history of the site. I understand today, following our workshop, if you'd like something brief, then I will keep it brief. I think the marathon 2-hour plus workshop was very helpful to anybody who had any interest in this project, and was very informative. I do think it's worth noting, just before I sort of sum up our application, that in all the meetings that we have had, which have all been advertised in public, as you've indicated at Chairwoman Sites, we've had a couple people sort of for us. At times we've had a couple people sort of against us at times, some more strongly than others, but there has not been a significant amount of opposition by any means to this project. And in doing this type of work for 20 years, I can't say that I've ever had a project where there wasn't some opposition. It's unheard of in this state, and that's the nature of folks, and there are different opinions, and we respect those who support us and don't. Everybody is certainly entitled to their feelings on these issues. What I like to do, certainly as an attorney, is focus on the law and the facts and the evidence that we've presented, and I'd like to sum that up tonight for you. And we do have our team here. In case there are any questions at the end of the hearing, because I want to be thorough and make sure, particularly that all commissioner questions get answered, and certainly any questions or different questions we have from the public. As you know from the multiple meetings that we've had, River Edge Park consists of office, warehousing predominantly, and a fairly large charter school that's been operating for many years. That's about 85,000 square feet. It's both an elementary school and a middle school, and it's been operating lawfully at this park for some time. So the site today, for those who I think have fairly questioned, is this an appropriate use, the mixed use that we're proposing this evening, is it appropriate? You can't look at that in a vacuum, I don't think fairly, without looking at what is on the ground today and what has been operating there today for quite some time. And I also think, in fairness, you can't really examine what's best for the area without examining what could happen there under today's code. And I don't think there's any dispute that under the IOP designation, a facility could be built, a logistics center in particular, could be built in the IOP. Today on the site, the proximity to the Delaware Bridge and 295, that certainly would be one possible use, and perhaps a very logical use as well. However, as we have shared and expressed for many months, we can't get over the views that would be lost for a residential project, a mixed-use residential project such as this. And I think this rendering, it says it all in terms of views that would be lost by large warehousing use. And CDA, their concept plan demonstrated that we could fit approximately a 550,000 square foot warehouse building on that site. But what a loss of the view that you have today if you went that route. And the other thing you certainly can't ignore, I don't think, in fairness, is the school use next door. And what is the most compatible use in proximity to that? Is another warehouse the most ideal use next to a large charter school? Or would a mixed use such as we're proposing, of course, here's the edge of the charter school here, would this mixed use, which is largely residential, be more compatible? And I think it's difficult to argue in fairness that the residential use is not more compatible, much more compatible than another warehouse use. As you may recall from Ms. Klein's presentation and information, the warehousing logistics use would generate over 100 tractor trailer trips, ADT, average daily trip, over the course of a day. And again, this is based on DelDOT's trip generation manual and what they would assign in terms of number of trips to a project like that. But we thought it was important to compare so that folks could make a recommendation on what they think is certainly best for the city and its inhabitants, including the school. We also looked at peak traffic, and in the AM and PM, which are the busiest times of the day, and what DelDOT requires us to study when a traffic study is required, we are less trips in the AM and PM peak hours than a comparable logistics center that would be permitted under your existing zoning code. What we have offered to do, though, is not just, hey, look at the numbers. These are the numbers that DelDOT would use. We're actually proposing to do a study. The warehouse use would not require a study. We're proposing to do a study as a condition, any positive recommendation certainly that you may have to offer us this evening. And we would do that study consistent with DelDOT standards, working with you as part of our site plan review, which would be a step 2, and with your town planner from AECOM, Mr. Rogers. So we're not just throwing the numbers that DelDOT uses out there out of their manual. We're actually going to do the analysis if we have the opportunity to do that as we've proposed. And we've proposed to do that from day one. We knew there'd be traffic concerns. We wanted to check that box thoroughly. And I knew the best way to do that was to bring our traffic engineer and also propose a study. So we've stood by that throughout this process. So you would get a traffic study that would not be required by right use. you're getting a use that would have less peak hour traffic than a permitted use, a mixed use that would have far less 18-wheelers or trucks than a residential type use that we're proposing. We also proposed, as you may recall at the last hearing, putting up a automated gate at the Buttonwood Avenue location in the event that there was an emergency and a second access was necessary for emergency purposes. And we offered to dedicate that to the city voluntarily because we heard concerns about the possibility of an emergency and having a second access point. I will note, and I think this is really important to reflect upon, a traffic study will confirm whether or not a second access is actually needed. We'll still set up the automated system, certainly, and pay for it, dedicated to the city for emergency purposes. But we did hear recent concern about, do we need a second access? Well, that's why you do traffic studies. And the part of the traffic study would reveal that if there was a second access required by DOT's regulations, then we may have to scale back the project a bit. We have the site plan process to go through to examine that more carefully as we continue down the road. We also voluntarily offered to do private waste pickup, so that would not be a burden on the city, because certainly the industrial use would not have imposed that burden on the city. So we wanted to create an equilibrium there. The other thing we looked at closely, because we heard a lot about it, was the concern over sea level rise. And that was a box important to us to check as well. And so we took a hard look at that. We spoke to DNREC. We obviously looked at plus comments from DNREC. And as you may recall, the 2050 projection of DNREC for this area is 0.7 inches to 1.9 feet of sea level rise. That's in the plus report. The 2100 estimate, year 2100, is 1.7 feet to 5 feet. So out to year 2100, the worst case scenario is a 5-foot sea level rise. As you may recall from our presentation, we asked Tom Diascanis from CDA to prepare an exhibit, and it's in the PowerPoint package, which demonstrates not only would we be outside of that 2100 5-foot rise projection, which was again a worst case scenario projection, we would have and agreed to provide first floor finished floor elevations of all residential units at the 12-foot elevation mark, which would exceed your code requirements and certainly be outside of the 2100 worst case scenario of 5 feet and the 2050 worst case scenario of 1.9 feet, obviously, which is a lower number. And if you want to take a look at that, that should be in the packet, the PowerPoint, where we had just to drill down into that exhibit for a moment, and I'll hand out my copy of that. The data that was used to generate that by our civil engineer is the data that is available by DNREC in DNREC's flood planning tool projections page, where this data was plugged in. So if I may approach on this hand side, I know you're familiar with it, but for those who may want to take a look at it, we had shown the elevation of a typical residential unit, what its elevation would be at the 12-foot elevation, and noted the 2050 sea level rise worst case scenario, 2100 in feet, showing where that water would come in regard to the elevation of the residential unit, and showed that we would be elevated above that. So that was an important box we wanted to check. We feel that we've done that based on the available science that we can give some reliability to. We certainly think that DNREC and its resources are some of the most reliable data out there. We're projecting way out. I mean, I think there is certainly a lot of speculation in the data, but that's all we have that has some additional reliability to use. What was also interesting that it was other large areas of the city are actually inundated in some of those scenarios where this site, particularly where the homes would be built, would be high and dry. And that was another exhibit that was generated by CEA using the DENREC tool that was available online. So we're very confident. We think the evidence we've presented demonstrates that this property would not be at risk in the 2050 and 2100 modeling, at least that DENREC has available to offer and based on the information on their website. Lastly, I did want to touch on, I think, two planning principles that are mutually exclusive that I think have come up in our conversations directly and indirectly. And that is the notion of single-use zoning and the notion of mixed-use zoning. There are certainly different opinions on this concept in terms of a planning tool. Your current comprehensive plan speaks a great deal about mixed use generally, and there truly are different philosophies on this. And what you see are some planners adhere to the single use zoning where you keep uses separate from one another. And then you have the mixed use zoning approach where you mix these uses together to create walkability and sustainability, and in some cases redevelopment. We clearly are advancing the mixed use approach, which is defended in the literature that I provided you in our last PowerPoint and cited to, as well as in your comp plan. But we do recognize opinions may differ, and we respect that difference in opinion. We think, though, in this instance, in this unique situation, given what could be lost in terms of the view, given the proximity of our proposed use to the school, this use is compatible and a better option than another large warehouse. And I'll sort of sum up with a quote from page 37 of your comprehensive plan. And I think this really says it all quite nicely in terms of this different planning philosophy. And there's nothing wrong with being on one side or the other, it's just a difference. And this is the quote: Newcastle's land use is shaped by historic patterns of development and planned efforts starting with its first comp plan in 1964. Often these two forces are at odds, whereas historically land development with mixed types of land within neighborhoods and even buildings. The trend since the Second World War has been to devote whole areas to single use. Hence, newer neighborhoods such as Van Dyke Village and Washington Park are solely residential. The office and industrial parks are solely places of work. Most properties along the ferry cutoff may only be used for commercial purposes. While the original intent of this type of land use zoning was to separate incompatible uses, such as heavy industry and residential, its effects have been to isolate uses at such a distance that many simple trips must be done by car. As a result, traffic has increased, commercial architecture has changed to facilitate and attract automobile drivers, and former neighborhood stores die off without parking or presence on a major road. Lately, planners have looked critically at this practice, and the idea of mixing uses has come back into fashion. And that is page 37 of your current comp plan. So it is not only is it a planning perspective that's alive and well in our country, it is something that was embraced in the comp plan. Does that mean every place should be mixed use? No, of course not. But it is a valid planning tool and a valid mechanism to advance a project such as this one. As we know, the land use map does need to be amended because of the IOP designation. But this use, I would respectfully submit, is certainly consistent with the notions of mixed use contained in your code, including in an industrial context. So that's my brief sum up. Hopefully that was brief enough. I went a little bit over, and we're certainly happy to do our best to answer any questions any of you have this evening of me or our consultants who have looked at this site now for probably well over a year. We've been before you for about half a year, but we've been looking at this for quite some time. Thank you all very much for your time and patience.
Thank you very much. Now we'll open it up for public comment. Do you have any public comment on the proposed change to a comprehensive plan land use, and the ordinance itself? All right. Going once, going twice. All right, so Mr. Tucker, I was going to see if you wanted to respond to any questions or any rebuttals of comments, but since we don't have anything, we'll end it. Mr. Rogers or Mr. Lasco? Any
In a sense,
comments?
you may want to close the floor to your public hearing before you go
Yes.
further.
All right. All right. So if there are no public comment, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so following our public hearing, we are going to go right into our City of Newcastle Planning Commission meeting. So I'll call the, yes.
You got to wait till 7 o'clock. That's when it was noticed for.
Oh, all right,
So
I
we'll take
thought,
a little recess here.
oh, all right, I thought it was 7 o'clock or immediately after the public hearing has ended. Is how it's stated.
That was intended, it went past 7.
Oh, all right,
You always have to start the meeting at the time.
Yeah, you don't want to do it early.
all right, we don't want to do it early. So we're taking a break until 7.
What would we do without the lawyers?
You know what?
In person, yes.
Of course, we work together.
Oh dear.
Are you? It's an interesting thing we're doing And it was a lot.
I don't drink.
It's really a Westchester.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
It's on my back. So this was the
With us?
Yeah.
But then maybe.
Yeah, we don't.
Well, I was your shoes. And feet is extremely.
Are you right? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, George.
In between, no, between the second.
Cash.
Right.
House.
And the cash was right there.
That's good. She's always here to answer questions. Coming up. Okay, I know that they did what we're doing. They did everything in time to die when they something. And the at the beginning of COVID, we had to replace the HVAC and all of them. So I still need to work for a while. But I'm going to that.
Of course. My brother would say, I wanted to, like, we went to the back. And I was like, I'm over this guy. Actually, you
Last week. I don't want to It's from there.
Well, yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay. Read it into the agenda. When we get to, or read it in. Minutes when we get to the agenda. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so We are calling the planning commission meeting of November 28, 22 to order. And we'll start with a roll call. Would you like to start again?
Sure. Matthew Lovely.
Dale Site,
Cynthia Gotti, Kristen Zumar, Tamara Summer, Bree Romero.
and I'd like to make a comment. Kiara's was planning to come tonight. I got an email that her son has a 104-degree temperature, so they were heading to the emergency room. So that's certainly a good reason. And George Velasquez's term on the planning commission ended on November 9th. And he decided not to continue on the planning commission. So I know that Mayor Carranza is working on his replacement. We also have Chris Rogers, city planner, Dan Lasco, city attorney, Sean Tucker, and team representing the Lucas Drive project, and members of the public. Thank you all for coming. We'll start with minutes. The October 24th, 2022 regular planning commission minutes. Any comments or corrections? Motion to approve? Second? Oh, I'll second them. All right. Any discussion? Then all in favor? Aye. My public comments is on the agenda for the planning commission meeting, since we just completed our public hearing on ordinance 536. We will not be entertaining public comments on that ordinance. The only other item on the agenda are special projects related to the 2020 comprehensive plan. Are there any comments on that agenda item? All right, then we'll move on to motion, discussion, and possible vote on the planning commission's recommendation on ordinance 536. So I'd like to invite Chris Rogers, our city planner, to discuss with us.
Madam Chair, do you want to read in the one comment that
Oh, yes,
the planning commission received via email?
I did. We did receive a comment last week that should be read into the minutes on the project. The subject is so much info about River Edge is lacking. How many of which kinds of housing units, what will be the elevation of the units close to the river, what flood protection will be built. Will residents be using the same road currently used by huge trucks and employees? Are there any examples of housing developments newly built in the midst of industrial complexes? If so, what adjustments to plans have to be made after residences were occupied? If not, this is unknown territory and should not be allowed. Dorothy Colburn, 153 East 2nd Street. All right, Mr. Rogers, I'll turn the discussion.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on ordinance 536. I have three succinct reasons for our recommendation, and then I go into detail on each of the reasons. So give me a few minutes and be patient if you will, please. Thank you. AECom recommends that the planning commission recommend disapproval of ordinance 536 to the city council for the following reasons. One, a mixed-use community on the subject parcels is incompatible with surrounding land uses. Two, a mixed-use community on the subject parcels would be served by a singular point of access, Lucas Drive, which also provides the sole access to the Riverside Industrial Park. Three, a mixed-use community on the subject parcels lacks connectivity with downtown Newcastle or other nearby communities or retail or service establishments. Regarding the incompatibility with adjacent and nearby land uses. The development of a mixed-use community comprised of approximately 450 residential units and 18,000 square feet of commercial space on the subject parcels would be incompatible with the long-established surrounding land uses of offices, light industries, and heavy industries. Subject parcels are located within an existing industrial office park served by Lukens Drive. The industrial office park has been planned and developed from its inception as just that, an industrial office park. In fact, when annexed into the city in 1993, the industrial office park zoning district was created and applied to the lands being annexed, which now comprise that portion of the River Edge Industrial Park located within the city. As discussed at the October 17, 2022 workshop, while the IOP zoning district does permit some uses compatible with residential development, such as banks, daycare centers, and restaurants, it also permits manufacturing, assembling, converting, altering, finishing, cleaning, or any other processing, handling, or storage of products or materials, packaging, storage, warehousing, and distribution. The portions of the River Edge Industrial Park located outside of the city limits, but still served by Lukens Drive are zoned industrial I and heavy industrial HI under the county's Unified Development Code Regulations, or UDC. Under the UDC, light industry is a permitted use in both the I and HI districts. Light industry is defined in the UDC as follows, quote, light industry. This category is designed to accommodate light intensity levels of manufacturing and assembly activities, storage, warehousing, services, associated offices, and similar uses. These include the following uses. There's a long list of uses that are permitted, and I'm only going to mention a few. Heavy and civil engineering construction, textile mills, wood product manufacturing, miscellaneous manufacturing, warehouse storage facilities, motor vehicle parts manufacturing. Heavy industry, where the business is less than 20,000 square feet, is also permitted in the I district. As described in the UDC, the nature and the purpose of the HI district is as follows. The heavy industry district is to be used principally for larger, heavy industrial developments not suited to other industrial districts and the uses that support those types of developments. Location of such districts typically have access to rail lines or navigable marine waterways in addition to roadway access. Districts shall be located to minimize adverse impacts from neighboring districts, such as noise, air, pollution, and unsightly structures. The range of uses permitted by the UDC and the HI district are consistent with said purpose and intent. It is the very nature of the industrial office parks, and of the IOP zoning district and the IOP suggested future land use district in the 2020 comprehensive plan to allow for the orderly development of business and industrial uses while minimizing potential negative impacts on nearby residential development. In this case, the residential development would occur within the industrial office park, causing unnecessary conflicts between the business and industrial uses and the residential development. It should also be noted that the subject parcels are located approximately 2,500 feet from the Croda Atlas Point plant located outside of city limits, and which is zoned heavy industry in the county. According to a settlement agreement between Croda and Denrec dated February 26, 2021, Croda owns and operates a facility located at 315 Cherry Lane in Newcastle, Delaware, where it manufactures surfactants that promote the mixing of oil and water-based ingredients in consumer products such as shaving cream and pharmaceuticals. The manufacture of these surfactants requires the use of ethylene oxide, EO, a colorless and highly flammable gas. A leak at the EO plant on November 25th, 2018 resulted in a shutdown of the EO plant and operation of the EO plant did not resume until January 13th, 2020. Unquote. According to the Denrec website describing the incident, the United States EPA has determined that EO poses a cancer risk to humans when inhaled at specified levels. The leak at the Croda EO plant necessitated the shutdown of Delaware Memorial Bridge for 6 hours. In addition, out of an abundance of caution, residents living near the facility were also advised to shelter in place. Communities subject to the advisory included Buttonwood and Collins Park. DENREC concluded that the incident was an exceedance of the permitted emissions level, but not a public safety issue. While AECOM makes no judgment as to the likelihood of future air emission violations and potential threats to public health from the Atlas Croda plant, it is precisely this type of occurrence that warrants the UDC to state that heavy industrial zoning districts, and by definition, the uses permitted therein, quote, shall be located to minimize adverse effects from neighboring districts such as noise, air pollution, and on-site obstructions, unquote. It should be noted that the Collins Park community, which received the shelter-in-place advisory, is approximately the same distance from the Croda plant as would be the proposed development on the subject parcels. It is AECOM's opinion that it is ill-advised to locate a high-density residential community on lands currently zoned as industrial office use in relatively close proximity to such a heavy industrial use such as the Croda Atlas Point plant. For this reason and the reason stated previously, AECOM finds that the development of a mixed-use community on the subject parcels is incompatible with adjacent and nearby land uses and the zoning districts that permit such uses. Regarding the singular point of access and Lucan's Drive, the development of a mixed-use community as previously described on the subject parcels would rely solely on Lucan's Drive as its only point of access to Cherry Lane and the surrounding roadway network. Lucan's Drive, which is a dead-end street, was designed for and currently functions as an internal road serving the River Edge Industrial Park. The addition of approximately 4,000 mostly residential trips per day from the subject development would lessen Lucan's Drive ability to function as an industrial office park road, which provides service to employees, delivery trucks, tractor trailers, from uses permitted by the city zoning and the county zoning for those portions of Lucan's Drive located outside of the city. Access to the proposed development as indicated on the concept plan submitted by the applicant is approximately 4,900 feet from Cherry Lane. Lucan's Drive also provides direct access to all of the uses between the subject parcels and Cherry Lane, which is approximately 16 businesses and industries. That is, every trip from the subject development must travel past these 16 businesses and industrial uses. There are approximately 25 access points onto Lucan's Drive between the subject parcels and Cherry Lane. Lucan's Drive also provides ingress and egress to 6 businesses and industrial uses beyond the subject parcels. That is, every trip to and from said 6 businesses and industrial uses must travel past the proposed development. The nature of the access to the subject parcels compounds the potential conflicts between the various land uses as described above. Use of Lucan's Drive by a 450-unit residential development would cause unnecessary conflicts between the residential traffic and the employee traffic and incoming and outgoing truck traffic to which Lucan's Drive was intended. AECOM acknowledges that other uses permitted in the IOP district on the subject parcels may generate similar volumes as the proposed mixed-use development. To be clear, our concern is not with traffic volumes, but with conflicts in driver behavior and expectations between residents of the mixed-use community and everyday users of the industrial office park, such as employees, truck drivers, etc. In addition, it is good planning practice to provide for multiple access points to large developments to facilitate emergency access. This allows access by emergency responders from multiple access points and also allows for access in the event one access point is blocked. By way of example, section 40.21.130 of the county UDC states, to ensure that adequate access for emergency vehicles is provided at all times, subdivisions or developments that contain 300 or more dwelling units shall be served by at least 2 entrance streets located as remotely as possible from each other. Where constraints prohibit that the establishment of 2 entrance streets, the department, with the advice of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, may permit the subdivision or development to contain a single access street, unquote. While potential relief of a secondary access point is built into the requirement, it is ill-advised to allow for large residential development on lands currently designated as industrial office park and that is unable to meet said requirement. AECom recognizes that the UDC does not apply to development in the city, but wishes to bring it to the planning commission's attention as an example of the recognition for the need for multiple access points for large residential developments. The singular point of access to a proposed development on the subject parcels is exacerbated by the at-grade railroad crossing of Lukens Drive. A train derailment would isolate the residential community from emergency responders. AECom acknowledges the potential use of Buttonwood Avenue as a secondary means of access during an emergency, but does not agree that special arrangements that would need to be made with emergency responders adequately addresses the significant change in land use. It should also be noted that the city subdivision regulations, section 213.11 states, streets shall be arranged to conform with the arrangement of both existing and planned streets so as to form a harmonious and systematic development of the city, unquote. AECom does not feel that the development of the subject parcels as proposed by the applicant on Lukens Drive provide for harmonious and systematic development of the city. Regarding the lack of connectivity with downtown Newcastle or nearby communities or other retail and service establishments. As mentioned above, the development of a mixed-use community comprised of approximately 450 residential units and 18,000 square feet of commercial space on the subject parcels would create an isolated community with no vehicular, pedestrian, or bicycle connectivity with downtown Newcastle or other nearby communities or retail or service establishments. Other areas within the city that permit mixed-use development of the intensity as proposed by the applicant is the DG zone. Areas zoned for DG are located at the gateways of the downtown. The city zoning ordinance states the downtown gateway district is intended to, 1, create a pedestrian-oriented neighborhood commercial district providing primarily local goods and services and preserving the gateway worthy of the new city of Newcastle. 2, extend the built form, character, and scale of the historic district. And 3, encourage a lively human scale gathering places for community through building design, orientation, and by encouraging a mix of uses. In addition, the DG zone was created as a result of being identified and located as a specific suggested land use district in the 2009 comprehensive plan and further implemented via the creation of extension zoning regulations to meet the intent of the comprehensive plan. AECom does not feel that the creation of a large isolated community within a small urban environment such as the city of Newcastle is good planning or in the best interest of the city. Conclusion. In conclusion, the subject ordinance proposes the rezoning of the parcels identified in the ordinance from industrial office park to R3 multifamily and GC general commercial for the development of approximately 450 residential units and 18,000 square feet of commercial space. The ordinance contemplates the rezoning of the subject parcels in accordance with the site plan determined by the planning commission as being in full compliance with the city code. The ordinance also states the comprehensive plan would be amended as necessary to make the approved site plan consistent therewith. As we have discussed in previous meetings, Delaware Code Title 22, subsection 702, states that the comprehensive plan shall be the basis for the development of zoning regulations. Accordingly, our previous discussions regarding Ordinance 536 have focused on the merits of amending the city's 2020 comprehensive plan to bring a mixed-use development such as the one proposed by the applicant. Map 3, suggested land use, and its companion section, suggested land use, future land use, in the city of Newcastle's 2020 comprehensive plan designates subject parcels in the entire River Edge Industrial Park as light industrial office park. For all of the reasons stated above, AECom does not feel that an amendment to the 2020 comprehensive plan to change the light industrial office park suggested future land use to permit a mixed-use development of the subject parcels is warranted. As such, the requested zoning in Ordinance 536 would be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, and AECom therefore recommends that the Planning Commission recommend disapproval of Ordinance 536 to City Council. Sorry for the long-winded report. But necessary to get these details in there.
All right, why don't we open it up for questions, discussion? recommendation and what. Anyone? All right, well, based on planner's recommendation, is there a motion to recommend his approval?
No, that's the wrong question. I'm sorry. City planner should have provided all of that information to us prior to the meeting as we had agreed. And I'm extremely disappointed to listen to all that now, which by the way, we've heard many, many times throughout all the meetings that we've got together to have this conversation in public. And I am shocked. And it's nice that you make a recommendation and that's appreciated. But that does not constitute the decision that we'll make here.
To your point, I felt it inappropriate to make a recommendation in advance of a public hearing. And did not want to sway your opinion in advance of a public hearing. And as you said, all of that information was provided at the workshop and during previous discussions.
So would someone like to make a recommendation that the planning commission continue with its study with Mr. Lesko?
Madam Chair, if I could try and distill this into a simple decision, sort of an A or B type of thing. At this stage, you really have not drilled down into the aspects of the full aspects of this rezoning. You don't know, you've got a couple of pretty pictures up there, but you don't know the full traffic study. You don't know the full sea level rise impact. You've got some arguments that the applicant has made, and that's fine. So I think at this point, the most you can do is either decide for yourself, is this inappropriate to amend the comp plan for a mixed-use development, generally speaking? Or is it that you don't have enough information to decide? That's a possibility. You either favor it, disfavor it, or you don't have enough information. That's really what it comes down to. And I would propose to you that if you disfavor it, you entertain a motion that would support the city planner's recommendation to reject ordinance 536. If you're not going to recommend an amendment to the comp plan, you can't have a rezoning. Right? Second, if you don't know at this point, you haven't drilled down enough to conclude whether a comp plan amendment for mixed use purposes is appropriate, or if you favor the comp plan amendment, then you might entertain a motion to proceed to fully evaluate the rezoning aspect. In other words, don't make a decision on the comp plan amendment, make a decision to plow forward and drill down on the serious details of this development. So it's either move forward and evaluate the rezoning and really get down to the details, or if you absolutely think that a mixed-use development of any sort here is incompatible with the city's comprehensive plan and not in the legitimate public interest, then you would entertain a motion to just fast stop here on ordinance 536 and recommend disapproval. So that's kind of where you have to decide for yourself what motion you want to make. Discussion, questions?
Would anyone make a motion to do evaluation?
I would make that motion. And I'll tell you why. I've listened to a lot of conversation, a lot of evidence, a lot of things. I think it's positive for Newcastle to grow. I think there's opportunity here for people. I think there's opportunity for more businesses here in town to provide more employment, and we need places for people to live. There's a school right next door. As the developers have pointed out, but so have many other people in the city who've spoken to me about it. It's the last view of the river available in the city to look at and to enjoy. For all the people who are concerned about, seawater rise and all that stuff, I'll go through all those points one by one. But whether we like it or not, we live in a capitalist economy. People own that land. That land is owned to have something built on it. It's going to be this, or it's going to be a couple of industrial buildings. So one way or the other, it's going to get developed. That's the way it works in our society. I've looked carefully at all the materials we have so far. It appears to me that the traffic will have a nominal impact. But I agree we could look more. Seawater rise, I'm satisfied. And so are all the banks who gave promises of money to develop this, and they don't do that lightly. They're convinced it's a safe thing to develop. As I said, I think population growth is good for the city, and it provides more taxes and more opportunity. So far, we've had good answers for police and fire. Utilities are in place because it's going to be developed anyway. The protected lands are not impacted. Stormwater runoff is addressed. We get a chance in the future to look at the site plan and to make comments addressing Mr. Rogers' concern that it doesn't look like old historic Newcastle. But in fact, Newcastle is a much bigger place than the 5 square blocks of historic Newcastle. And I think we need to be real about that. So I would make a motion that we proceed to the next step.
So I'm hearing there's a motion on the table to proceed to continue to evaluate the rezoning and the site plan as stated in ordinance 536.
I think that's the only way we can do it because it's joined together. The comprehensive plan, zoning, and site plan are joined into one thing. So the only thing we can do if we're interested to learn more to make a better decision is to go forward.
And I would like to add, I think there is further evaluation and details that need to be provided. So I would go in favor of that, just based upon what was just read to us. There's some risk and safety concerns for the citizens that will be living there on my part. So I would like to see if some of that can be reviewed as we get more details provided to us. Because before that, I was leaning in favor, but now I'm sort of on the fence with the information I'm just trying to digest from what I just heard.
Madam Chair, point of order, before you discuss further, do we have a second on the motion?
We have a second on.
I'll second.
Any other discussion?
So the motion is to get more information, not to vote.
The motion on the floor is to proceed to fully evaluate this project
So this would
through the
fall under,
rezoning and site plan.
so this would fall under, we don't have enough information. So that's is that what we're saying?
Well, that's what it seems like certain commissioners have said, for sure. And that's your prerogative. You don't have to make a decision to recommend approval of a comp plan amendment tonight to continue to study the rezoning aspect of this. The motion on the floor is to proceed and continue to study the rezoning aspect of this. And ultimately, you will have to make a vote and a recommendation on ordinance 536 as a whole, both the comp plan amendment and the rezoning.
This would allow us to gather more information regarding
That's right.
to fiscal impact.
Anything you're interested in exploring as to it, yes.
It's difficult because My understanding, based on all the things that we've been told, is that we can't say, yes, we think the comp plan should be amended and move forward. We're not allowed to make that.
Well, you could, theoretically, you could make that, but I don't think it's necessary for you to make that. Because number one, what you're making is a recommendation. You won't be changing the comp plan. That has to go to council.
Yeah.
So if your ultimate inclination is to recommend the amendment to the comp plan, you may as well consider the rest of the ordinance too, and the rezoning aspect of it, before you vote on that particular point. But if you're convinced right now that any comp plan amendment would be inappropriate, then you could vote to recommend disapproval of ordinance 536. Doesn't sound like that's the motion on the floor, though.
No, that's not. the motion.
The motion on the floor is to proceed.
And my understanding to proceed, we would be proceeding here as a planning commission to gather more information and not making a recommendation to the city council at this point.
Correct.
What does it look like moving forward?
Well, this is to a great degree up to you, the city planner, the city engineer. This is where you really, if you're going to get into the rezoning aspect of things, you really need to drill down on hard numbers. So that traffic impact study that Mr. Tucker was referring to, I would consider that an essential step. But it goes beyond that too. It's not just volume count. If you heard the planner's recommendation, he wasn't concerned with volume necessarily, but the mix of heavy trucks versus residential traffic seemed to have been a greater concern. So that can be an aspect of your exploration as well. Sea level rise, city services that are available, environmental impact, all these things can be considered. The aesthetics, the density of it all can be all considered and evaluated in more detail. And for that, I think you'd work very closely with the city planner and the city engineer to drill down on those details. They will help you, guide you, and instruct you as to what questions are asked, should be asked, what information is helpful, what the information that you get back really needs. And so that's the nuts and bolts of it.
So the additional information will be putting the onus back on the applicant to get us that information, is that correct?
You're going to have to provide some information to them as to what is appropriate to produce for you to evaluate this. You have to tell them what you want.
And what's AECom's role in terms of getting this information?
They should be a close advisor to you, to assisting you in the technical details of this project.
Hearing your concerns and the information that you're seeking, I would come up with a list of studies, evaluations, reports, however you want to call it, and put before you is this what you're talking about before I would ask the applicant to spend money to provide any particular report. So I would like to, if the vote is to move forward with further evaluations, I would advise you as to the types of things that would answer your questions and make sure that we're all on the same page and provide that to the applicant and start to get that information back and evaluate it as appropriate. I don't want to tell them, or, should they do a fiscal impact analysis of city services? We would want to confirm that here as a planning commission before we ask that of the applicant.
With the information, the studies that we get from AECom, I guess my concern would be, wouldn't that be supportive of the AECom position? I just want to make sure we're getting a balance. Look at this.
Yes, the applicant would provide the studies.
I just want to make sure that if we're working strictly with AECom to get these studies, that it's a balanced view as opposed to just supporting AECom's position, which, we respect, of course, but we just want to make sure that it's a balanced view.
My understanding is the studies will be provided by the applicant. We would just facilitate asking
Critical
for
review.
those studies from them to make sure that we're getting what we want. Specific studies
And to the extent that they're technical in nature, we would provide technical review of traffic study, sea level rise analysis, if you will, stormwater management. You know, I would work with the city engineer, for review of technical documents that are not really planned. Yes, we have work team and have environmentalists and would review sea level rise analysis, wetlands report. The things that we're, a lot of the things that we're talking about are fairly routine in the development community and for city engineers and city planners, traffic studies, fiscal impact analysis, wetlands report, those type of things are part of the routine process.
Regards to those concerns that you were out there, emissions, property, things like that. Emergency outlets and how that would look.
Like the neighbor or because there were another.
Yes.
incident or something like that.
Good question.
Madam Chair, if the council, the commissioners could please speak up. I'm not sure your voices are being picked up because I can't hear you.
Yes, as part of the review, we would recommend that you seek comments from, for example, the emergency responders and their ability to provide emergency access to the community. You know, how important is it to have that second access? Is it important, important enough to create a special arrangement with Buttonwood Avenue with a security gate that everybody has, all the emergency responders have access to?
So suppose that we said that by the time of our next meeting, you would provide a list of those sorts of studies which are routinely required in this kind of situation, so that in our next meeting, we could decide which ones we wanted to pursue. So we can actually do
Good.
something.
Don't we have a motion on the table? Don't we need to, first of all, vote on that the motion that's on the table to further evaluate the proposed project in ordinance 536?
I think the commissioners need to know what that means, and that's what we're fleshing out now. Speak up, please. Can't hear you.
No, I was saying, yeah, that's what I feel like the conversation is. So, yeah.
Nobody wants to make a vote for something they don't understand. And I'm the first to admit, it's all new to me, so I like to understand.
And I don't think it's a matter of just not being able to understand totally. I think it's a matter of digesting all the information and knowing confidently that we're making the right decision. That's all, as far as the recommendation, at least that is for me. I'm probably one of the newest members here, so when you raise those issues about safety, environmental, and all those things, that's why I said, okay, do they have enough information for them to now respond to that? Because I would like to understand what that looks like. So, what's my issue?
To answer Commissioner Batty's point of question, the answer would be yes. I would be able to provide a list of further studies or recommended further studies, evaluations that seek to provide the information that you're asking for, that I'm here.
Thank you.
By the next meeting.
Good. Thank you.
So point of order, should that become part of the motion that's on the table?
I don't think that's necessary. You're always going to be able to give Mr. Rogers direction on what you want from him. So I think the question is, are you moving forward or are you not? That's the question. Motion on the floor, seconded, is to move forward with evaluating rezoning as a whole.
That's the motion on the floor. It has been seconded. Ready for a vote or discussion?
As we move forward like this, with the list for the next meeting of possible reports, as things come up, we can request additional information as we delve deeper and decide maybe something needs to be explored further. Is that correct?
Yes, if you remember way back to the beginning of our discussions, and maybe it was discussed during the workshop, your role in a rezoning is to make a recommendation to the city council. The planning commission can ask for reports of studies, et cetera, called additional zoning support information to bolster your decision on your recommendation. Typically, there is a time limit by which you have to make your recommendation and receive and digest all of that additional zoning support information, and the applicant has waived that time. So if you, after the first batch of reports, if you will, and studies, you still need further information, we can request it of the applicant.
All right, are we ready to vote to continue to fully evaluate this project? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We're moving forward. Moving on, the next agenda item, projects related to comprehensive plan goals. At our last meeting, there were a couple specific areas of the comp plan discussed. One was EV chargers, and particular the level 3 fast chargers. Kristen, you have not gotten any information yet, all right? And the other was home ownership, Cynthia, which you we're interested in following up with occupancy rates, rental rates, et cetera.
I haven't done anything. This is kind of sort of my available time.
Understand.
But we'll do.
understand.
I will.
All right. All right, any other comp plan studies? Other comment? Yes.
Chair, may
I
I
be
be excused this evening?
Pardon?
May I be excused this evening?
Yes, you may.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commission members? All right, I have one. An organizational change. I reported that George Velasquez is not coming back. My term on the planning commission is ending on December 13th, and I decided to not continue for another term. I've served on the planning commission for about 8 years and have been reappointed a couple of times. I've also been serving as chair. By our planning commission code, commission shall elect annually a chairperson and vice chairperson from among its own number. So I would like to, or I am nominating Matthew Lovely as chairperson and Bree Rivera as vice chairperson. Are there other nominations from the commission? Hearing none. Would someone make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
All
I would be delighted to make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Okay. All right, thank you, Matthew and Bree, and I'm sure your leadership will be great. I appreciate working with all of you and for the opportunity to serve on the commission with all of you.
I
and
think
with Mr. Rogers and,
we thank you
So,
too.
oh,
I think we should give her a round of applause.
our next planning commission meeting is December 19th. It's back at the police station. And with that, motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Enjoy your retirement. If that's what you want to
My
do.
rest